Welcome, friends and supporters who are joining us today in DC and those who are joining us from around the world via live stream. I'm Erin Los-Cutraro. I am founder and CEO of She Should Run, and I am so excited about tonight. So we stood here before you last December at our national conversation last year and told you just how humbled we were by the growth that we had seen in our community. And I am absolutely over the moon to tell you that over the last year, we have seen over 15,000 women join the She Should Run community, raising their hands of interest in running for office. It's truly historic growth. So now the question is, what's next? We can't stop, we won't stop, which is why many of you saw that we made a pretty bold announcement a couple of months ago that we set a goal, it was our internal goal that we made public, to get 250,000 women to run for office by 2030. We're in it for the long haul. And I know a lot has happened over the last year, including repeated tragic events like the one that happened yesterday in Texas. And I know that that is weighing heavily on many of our hearts and minds tonight. I wanted to acknowledge it. We're coming together on the eve of Election Day to set a vision for where we go from here. Our theme tonight is Leadership Evolved. And before we get started, I wanted to take a quick moment to thank those wonderful people and organizations who made tonight or today possible. Many thanks to PG&E, Deloitte, AFLAC, Facebook, Annie-Bell, Council of Insurance Agents and Brokers, NG Growth Advisors, Barbara Lee Family Foundation, Comcast NBC Universal, Charles Hollinsworth and Bradley Kaiser, MM LaFleur, who you'll see dress some of our speakers tonight, our great brand partners, dun dun, hopefully that doesn't happen again, our great brand partners in CBX, and our media partner tonight, Refinery 29. And none of this would be possible without the She Should Run team. I will not ask them to stand because you will not be able to see them anyway. They're running all over the place. But we've all worked really hard to make this event come together, and I know it will be an enjoyable experience. So now I'll turn it over to the instrumental Claire Bresnahan English.
Everyone, the She Should Run team is just truly excited for you to be here tonight. We cannot wait all year to be able to gather our community in one space, both here in this theater with a sold-out crowd and through hundreds on live stream. And it really is, the She Should Run community is a really special place. It's made up of people like you who care about getting more women in office. It's made up of members like our front runners, which are women in DC who dedicate their time and money. Front runners, do we have you in the house? Yeah, I thought so. And it's made up of incredible incubator members, which the incubator is our flagship program. It is there to be able to be a starting place for women who are just starting to think about a run for office. It's free to join. Anyone right now who is thinking about running for office, please join the incubator community. You can just go to sheshurun.org. It truly will change how you perceive yourself and what you think is possible with your leadership. We even have incredible leaders in the office in the House, like I think we have a European Member of Parliament, Soraya Post. Soraya, are you in the House yet? On her way. She's on her way. She'll be there at the reception. And we also have just the distinct pleasure of having our MC and our board member, Jess Weiner, back in the House to MC our evening. I'm going to give a brief introduction because this woman has earned it. She is CEO and cultural change maker with over 2 decades of experience in the business of empowerment. During this time, she has been responsible for 2 enormous cultural shifting moments with Barbie's latest body evolution and Dove's memorable Real Body Beauty campaign. As the CEO of Talk to Jess, a consulting firm that advises Fortune 100 and 500 companies on the best practices for creating a message of empowerment, Jess is called a sought-after secret weapon by her clients. We have been lucky enough to have her as our own secret weapon for the past 3 years as she has hosted our national conversation and served on our national board of directors. Jess, welcome.
Hi, everybody. How are you? We have a jam-packed night tonight. You ready to roll? Yeah. All right. So as Claire and Erin mentioned, I've been a social entrepreneur for over 25 years, and my sole mission and purpose has been to change the way women are represented in media, advertising, and our pop culture atmosphere. We know that representation matters. Everybody in this room knows that representation matters, and perhaps more so now than ever before. That's why we're here tonight. So leadership, our theme tonight is leadership evolving, the evolution of leadership, and it's coming, and each and every one of you is a part of it. And tonight we're here to start this national conversation to celebrate the work that She Should Run is doing. And as Erin mentioned, they've got an incredible vision, and that's what really enrolled me. So there's 250,000 women that we want to envision running for office by 2030. So we know that when women and girls run, we all win collectively. And so what I wanted to have us focus on tonight is how in these conversations we're going to evolve, reframe, and redefine how everybody in this room is thinking about leadership, how we're talking about leadership, how when we have the chance, if we sit on media empires, and all of us do, anybody in here with a social media account sits on a media empire of communication and conversation, you're the CEO, so how are we shifting where we can the conversation? You're going to hear from amazing, incredible women in politics and media tonight who are sharing their expertise and most importantly, their personal stories. Because one of the ways that we can really inhabit this vision is to shift the narrative, the public narrative and our private narrative. And that's what we're going to focus on tonight. We know that evolution that we're seeking first comes from within, and we're going to rewrite some of those barriers and those stories that we tell ourselves and we tell others that may be inhibiting our future generations of thinking about running for office. So to kick us off tonight, I couldn't think of a better partner to do this. We have our makers team who have put together a video of one of our fabulous first speakers, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, about getting women off the sidelines when it comes to politics. Myra, let's roll that clip. So we know that we couldn't have started this. Oh, there we go with that feedback. This is a sign of a great show. We couldn't think of a better speaker to kick us off tonight in our national conversation than Senator Kirsten Gillibrand from New York. Throughout her time in the Senate, Senator Gillibrand has been a leader in some of the toughest fights in Washington, bringing together Democrats and Republicans to repeal the military's Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy that banned gays from openly serving, providing permanent health care and compensation to 9/11 first responders, and fighting to keep jobs for the American middle class. If you know her, you know she's a true collaborative leader and uses her power to be a voice for the voiceless. And tonight she's here to talk to us about the ways that we need to evolve and engage and encourage female leadership in this country. Please help me in welcoming Senator Kirsten Gillibrand.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Jess, and thanks for hosting this conference and inviting me to be part of it. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for being here. It's wonderful. I'm so glad you were able to be here, and thank you for the young girls who are somehow skipping school. Not sure how you managed that one, but thank you. I just want to take a minute to talk a little bit about the horrific mass shooting yesterday. Obviously, all of our hearts break for the victims and the families and for the community of Sutherland Springs in Texas. And we're, of course, still learning about what happened, how this murderer was able to purchase a gun, whatever his twisted rationale was for walking into a house of worship in a small town and slaughtering more than 20 people, including young children. Our incredible law enforcement officials are working hard to answer all of that, but the most important fact of all of this is something that we know already very well. This is yet another case where someone on American soil who has absolutely no business getting their hands on a weapon of war was able to get one and used to commit heinous mass murder. Of the worst 5 shootings in our history, 3 of them have been in the last 17 months. Think about that. In a small town in America, nearly 7% of that town's population was slaughtered just because they went to church that day. There's no question that the gun debate has to change. So for all of you here in this room, I want to say this very clearly. I think the answer to ending gun violence in this country is by making it a women's issue. And I say this very purposefully. I think if every mother in America should look at these issues and make the decision about whether or not assault weapons should be publicly available, about whether or not they want large magazine clips publicly available, whether or not we should have background checks on every weapon sold, and whether or not we should have a national trafficking statute. I believe if this became our issue, we would change the nature of the debate. This wouldn't be something that people would hem and haw about. It wouldn't be something where the NRA dominates everything. It wouldn't be an issue that really is about money. It would be an issue that affects us at the heart, our souls, our purpose, our ability to keep our families and our community safe, and that's where this debate needs to be. And so if we do make it a women's issue, I think we change everything. Because we can speak to our sisters, our mothers, our aunts, our friends who live in red states, who live in purple states, who live in states that are rural, who live in places where gun violence isn't the same issue. We really have to do something about this, and I think that if we fight this battle, we will win it. With that in mind, I want to turn to sort of the tools for how we're going to win these debates and many others. I'm going to start with a story that I hope we can all take some inspiration from, and it goes like this. About 145 years ago, a woman from my home state in New York walked into a voting booth on Election Day in Rochester, New York, and like any engaged citizen, she voted, she spoke her mind, and cast her vote, and she was arrested. Her crime was voting, because at that time, like it was for more than half of our country's history, it was illegal for women to vote. At the trial, when the judge finally asked her if she wanted to speak, she said, "Yes, Your Honor, I have many things to say. In your ordered verdict of guilty, you have trampled underfoot every vital principle of our government. My natural rights, civil rights, political rights, judicial rights are all alike ignored." She then refused to pay the fine. The trial was a turning point in the long struggle for our inalienable right to vote, and her courage won newfound respect that helped begin to turn public opinion. Now, Susan's act of selfless courage wasn't something from out of the blue. This wasn't something she did in a vacuum, because the story really begins 25 years earlier when roughly 300 brave women and a few good men, led by Elizabeth Cady Stanton, held the first women's rights convention in Seneca Falls, New York. They met to talk about a very radical idea, to declare that all men and women are created equal, deserving the right to vote. Because they had the courage to fight for what they believed in, they did. No movement is ever perfect, but the pure injustices in their lives fueled this dedication and determination that continues to this day to realize and protect a basic civil right. The sacrifice and courage of each generation inspiring the next generation to do whatever it took to make the difference. And it reminds me about what should drive our own advocacy for empowerment of others, the fight for those who are most at risk, most at need, who need a voice, who are being marginalized and aren't being listened to. We have a lot to learn from these women whose shoulders we today now stand on, because I know their legacy lives on in this room, in the women activists represented here. We are all sisters in this struggle for equality and justice, inclusive of race, religion, cultural identity, individual passions, because truly an injustice against one of us is an injustice against all of us. Our work is not fully finished as long as anyone is left behind, because the fundamental truth is this promise of truth and justice bind us. They bring us together, and we are so much stronger when we are working together, which is how we will win the battles ahead of us. Which brings me to the Women's March. How many here marched? Well, I thought it was pretty amazing. Certainly the most inspiring moment of my political life. And I thought it was so powerful because the moment was intersectional. It didn't matter what you marched for. If you marched for women's reproductive freedom, you could have marched for Black Lives Matter, you could have marched for immigration rights, LGBT equality, clean air, clean water. It didn't matter. It just mattered that you made a sign and you were willing to carry it and you were willing to tell people what you cared about. My favorite sign still is the grandma whose sign said, I can't I can't believe we're still protesting this S word. I won't say that here. But God bless that grandma because she was still doing it. And God bless all of you for doing what you're doing. 10 months after the Women's March, the grassroots energy is growing, not fading. And it is women who are holding our democracy together in these dangerous times. It's women who are taking their outrage and running for office, volunteering for campaigns, and in many cases, joining advocacy groups for the very first time. The only reason we don't have Trump care today is because all of you, the grassroots, stood up and fought back and said, no, I have a pre-existing condition. My child has a pre-existing condition. My family would never have access to insurance if we don't have basic coverage. And so it really mattered. Those personal stories is what drove the debate. The personal concerns and tragedies is what changed people's minds. It changed people's minds, including senators. And that's when our democracy works. It's frankly the only time our democracy works is when regular people stand up and demand action. So I think the solution and the answers and the message is all going to come from you. It's going to come directly from the grassroots. It's not going to come from some white knight in Washington. It is not going to come from politicians. It's going to come from each one of us. And I think this moment is truly a call to action. Right now, the next chapter of the women's movement is being written, and it's up to each one of us to help author it by fighting for what we believe in. It's a moment when all of us know that our voices, individually, are uniquely important and powerful. And you see it right in front of your eyes, where women all across the country are courageously standing up and speaking out and saying, me too. They are an inspiration because they are changing society in a way that makes it unacceptable for people to turn a blind eye to violence. They're showing that we can build a more just society for ourselves and families and future generations by shining a light on the injustices and saying that we won't accept it anymore. Whatever the issue is that is most important to you, each one of us can be that agent for change. We can be the ones who can start a movement locally, nationally, at our companies where we work, in our communities, on college campuses, at our kids' schools. These are the kinds of things that all of us need to use. These are the tools to actually get things done. And it's essential that we do it as hard as we can possibly imagine and never give up. Because if we give up, even for a moment, even for a day, even for a week, we will lose. And we will lose everything that we care most deeply about. Nothing is going to change unless we fight for it. And I feel very strongly about this fact. Nothing is going to change unless we change the players on the field in Washington and in local offices around this country. Because, go ahead, we definitely want that. Because if we want a different outcome, we need a very different players list. We need to change the dynamics in government and change who has a seat at the table, because our priorities and our solutions are fundamentally different. I'm asking each one of you to encourage a woman to run for office, support them when they do run, and run yourselves if no one else will. That is how we change the landscape for the long term. To everyone here who's running for office, I commend you, and I will help you. To every woman who is thinking about running, or even those who have never considered it before, I have news for you too. You should run. I am so optimistic because we are already seeing women run in unprecedented numbers in real time. Emily's list would normally be training about 1,000 candidates right now. They are working with over 19,000 women right now. In Virginia, where Election Day is tomorrow, more than 2/3 of the Democratic candidates in contested seats for the House of Delegates are women, many of them women of color. So we need to support them. And imagine, just imagine for a minute, and really think of this in your mind. Imagine what would be different if we had 51% of women in Congress. Just imagine. Do you think we'd be debating whether women should have access to contraception? No. Do you think we'd be debating whether or not we should end sexual violence on college campuses or in the military? No. Do you think we should be debating whether or not we should have a national paid leave plan? No. And do you think we should still be debating whether we should have equal pay for equal work? No, things would be very, very different. And so those are the kinds of things that we should imagine in our minds when we're deciding whether we should run, whether we should support a women candidate. That's it. Everything changes when the people who are at the table are different. So whether it's the soft corruption of money in politics, or the revolving door between industry and their regulators, or the hard corruption of spending billions of dollars in undisclosed money to sway elections, we need our voices to count by voting and by not giving up and by running for office. Because not until every American woman and girl reaches her God-given potential will America reach hers. America, like no time in my lifetime before, needs you right now. So let's take back our future. Thank you.
Well, I told you we were going to be in for a rocket night. It's an amazing way to start our program. And I want to echo the sentiment when we start off with this vision to shift the way we see women in public office and in the way we see ourselves out in the world. We're all here for one very, very specific reason. What we have been doing thus far is no longer working. So tonight, use this as a reset button. Use this as a time to pull from all of these speakers and all of these conversations tonight a nugget that you can take back with you to whether you're going to follow what the Senator and what we're going to be asking you tonight, which is ask a woman to run, encourage a woman to run, support female candidacy, but also in your own life, in the way that you perceive and see leadership. Think about the women you're going to meet and hear from tonight, and how do we begin to pay that forward? So one of our next speakers, I'm excited for you to meet. Her name is Jenny Abramson. She's the founder and managing partner of Rethink Impact. One of the things that we hear the most from women who say that they're on the fence about running for office is typically when it comes to financials. How am I going to afford this? I don't know anything about fundraising. I don't even know where to begin. Well, Jenny and her team actively seek out investment opportunities that are not just profitable, but actually create ecosystems of change. One such example of that ecosystem is her work with our friends at Ellevest, who Rethink Impact has backed in a big way this year. And if you haven't heard about Ellevest, we encourage you to do so. She's a next generation revolutionary, and she seeks to equip female entrepreneurs with capital that they need to use technology to solve the world's biggest problems. And we're delighted that she's joined here tonight in the front row with her two daughters. Hi, Zoe. Hi, Ella. Tonight, Jenny's going to remind us the most important person that we can invest in is ourselves. Please welcome Jenny Abramson.
Hey there. I normally speak, but I don't usually have them sitting in the front row. It's very different. No, I'm Jenny Abramson, and for those of you who own your own agency, i.e. Twitter, to Jess's point, I'm at Abramson Jenny or at Rethink Impact, so feel free to keep the conversation going from here. So I'm clearly not a senator, and I'm not running for office. So why am I here? Well, to Jess's point, I think it's because I run the largest U.S. venture capital fund that does impact in the U.S. that's investing in women. And what I thought I could do today is share briefly how I got to this place, what it means for you, and then where we can collectively go from here. So before I entered venture capital, I was actually the CEO of a mobile security company that was dealing primarily with sexual assaults and school shootings on college campuses and trying to prevent them. And beyond the important impact work we were doing, what struck me was the fact that I was often the only female in a given room or on a given stage as a tech CEO. And as any good nerd, I decided I would look into the data and try to understand what was happening. And I looked, and just for context, 20 years ago, when my own mother, who's also here tonight, Patty Abramson, was running one of the first venture capital funds investing in women. At the time, women got 2.5% of all venture capital dollars. And when I looked into the data, what I saw was that 20 years later, shockingly, it was a lower percent. It was 2.19%. Now, this is despite the fact that 60% of undergraduate degrees are now earned by women, 60% of master's degrees are earned by women, that women start businesses at twice the rate of men, that half of Harvard Business School's class is now women, right, a quarter 20 years ago. And what seemed even more striking than this is that all the data out there that didn't exist when my mom did this showed that businesses with females in their leadership teams or at the top did significantly better financially from a pure ROI, return on investment standpoint. So this all seemed quite bizarre to me, but also as a business person seemed like a great business opportunity. So I thought a lot about what was going on, and I think the biggest reason behind this really relates to pattern recognition, right? Which is that in venture capital, you don't have perfect data when you're picking who to invest in. And so you usually pick companies or people who remind you of yourself or something you know. Now, you may know this, but less than 6% of all people in my job making investment decisions in our future companies are women. That's actually down from 10% in 1999. So it's not shocking that some subconscious bias might be at work. So this astounding lack of capital going to women, combined with this incredible opportunity for financial returns, and my belief that impact businesses do better, and there's data to show it, than non-impact businesses socially, made sense to then launch a venture capital fund. And we actually officially closed and announced the fund last March on International Women's Day, of course, as $112 million to invest in great female entrepreneurs. So this is where you all come in. Venture capital is very much a network business. So who gets funded, for better or worse, is often based on who you know. And we're trying to change that. So what I thought I could do today is give you all the 3 things that are the keys that we're looking for when we invest in businesses, so that you can tell your friends and you can connect them with me on Twitter or however else you want to do it, and we can help them get funding, because that's what we're here to do. And if we can't help them with that, we'll help them in some other way. So the 3 things that we look for are, first and foremost, great financial return-oriented businesses. Businesses that have at least $1 million in revenue, often closer to 10, 20, up to 50 million now annually, and will be at 100 million within the next 5 years. So that's the first thing. We're not doing seed stage investing. There are thankfully lots of pockets of money that are going to that. We're primarily doing A, B, and C rounds. The second thing we're looking for are tech-driven businesses that are solving our world's greatest challenges in education, in healthcare, in the environment, economic empowerment, and beyond. So if you know a business that's tech-driven so it can really scale, that's solving one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals or any major problem, we usually want to see it. And we think it's good for business. And the third thing, I know this one will shock you, is we're looking for businesses that have female leaders. It usually is the CEO, I'd say 70+% of the time versus 2% in the industry. But we're fine if there's a male CEO, female COO type combination. It's much more for us about a diversity of perspective at the table. And frankly, we want diversity in all ways, not just gender, because we think it's good business. If you think about a world where 70% of consumer spending decisions are made by women, it might be shocking to think that a company would do well without a female at the table if it's a consumer bought product, right? So we think this is just great business. So, when we created Rethink Impact, our idea was this isn't about us. You're not just getting our money and our sort of individual talents. You're really getting an ecosystem. So our investors are incredibly diverse. They come from more than 32 states. 50% of them are women. They're foundations, they're universities, there are others. So when we invest in companies, we try to give them resources well beyond what they get from our talents or our capital. And I'm going to end by sort of sharing why this really matters and where I think we can all go from here. So, a number of years ago, the companies that were the big brands that you heard of, they stayed the big brands for a long, long time. And the small businesses, they stayed the small businesses. Well, the economy has changed and technology has changed it. And so today, some of the biggest household brands, Amazon, Google, Facebook, Twitter, they didn't exist 20 years ago. These are all venture-backed businesses. And if we can back businesses today that have females in their leadership team, those will be the Googles, the Facebooks, the Amazons of tomorrow. And as we all know in this room, it's those companies that not only impact business, but they impact media, they impact politics, and they impact the world more broadly. And so if we want to change the companies of tomorrow and change equality of tomorrow, I deeply believe we need to be investing today, and that change is possible in a way that it wasn't before the technology that exists today, because we can now make the future companies of tomorrow. And I can only hope that when Zoe and Ella, or 9 and 7, are here in 20 years, that we are sitting with a much different level of equality in this room, in politics, in business, in venture capital specifically, and in the world more broadly. So thank you for joining me and hopefully changing that.
I have to say, one of the best, I was watching from the side, and to watch their faces watch you is awesome. How cool. What a great mom and grandma you have going on, huh? An amazing family. How many of you are here for the first time for a She Should Run event? Oh, fantastic. And who are our repeat customers? Welcome back. And hello, live stream. I forgot to say hello to you earlier. By the way, we're using hashtag tonight 250K by 2030. If you'd like to join in on that fun. And I'm so delighted to introduce you to our next powerful speaker, because as we look, and here's the behind the scenes of how this stuff gets made. Here's how the sausage gets made. So what Jenny mentioned about being open, and actually you heard the Senator Gillibrand say the same thing about being open and helping other women on this journey. So when we imagine the conversation for tonight, and then we start to imagine what voices need to be in this room, and how do we need to shape the conversation, and how do we need to do that. You know, typically as the MC role, I'm calling all my power ladies and asking, like, where do we go next, and who needs to be here? And so in talking to Sally Krawcheck at Ellevest, and then Lisa Stone, who's now their CMO at Ellevest, I got led to Jenny. And so the other piece of tonight is actually speaking up, and we're going to get into this in a couple minutes, about speaking up about your dreams, your desires, your intentions, your needs. And tonight is a really incredible group of women to do that in. And we need to also raise the voice in that way, because we know when we think about leadership, it requires bravery and resilience, which leads me to our next speaker. We know that barriers must be crossed and walls must be torn down, not built, in order to enact the kind of long-lasting change and representation that we seek. And nobody knows this better, perhaps, than Representative Ileana Ros-Lehtinen. As a young girl, she and her family immigrated to the U.S. from Cuba to escape the communist Castro regime. She's a long-time fighter for women's rights and education rights for all. Representative Ros-Lehtinen is the first elected Hispanic female in both Florida's state legislature and the U.S. Congress. Yes. So she will share her path to leadership, both the challenges and the opportunities that she's faced in her 30 years of public service. Please welcome Representative Ileana Ros-Lehtinen.
Thank you. And I love this, a short podium at last. Oh my gosh, what a dream come true. Well, thank you so much. What a wonderful introduction. It's hard to follow these dynamic speakers, and I'm thrilled to be here. I really, really am. I'm excited to be part of this organization. I'm excited about your project, 250K by 2030, and let's get that trending. And it's up to you. Come on, so use that hashtag. But what a wonderful opportunity, what a great forum to promote a national conversation about what we can all do. Each one of us can participate in this, in encouraging more young women to run, or not so young women, to run for elective office. Before I ran in 1982, oh my gosh, how many of you were not born in 1982? Don't do that to me. Don't do that to me. No. So before I was first elected in 1982. I was a school teacher, and I loved that. It was an opportunity to help the people in my community. I had a private elementary school in Hialeah, a working class neighborhood of Miami-Dade County, pretty impoverished area, helping the parents, translating documents. And then somebody said, rather than help this person and that person, you can run for office and you can establish the policies and the rules and the regulations that help all of these folks. So it was nothing that I had ever thought of because no one in my family had ever run for public office. I was not active. I'm ashamed to say I'm not proud of it, but I was not active in student government and in middle school. By then it was junior high. In high school, at any of my colleges, was just not involved. But I knew that the only qualification needed for public service is the desire to make a difference. And I think that's what I was doing, is being a teacher. And I was very fulfilled. And then this whole new world opened up to me. And it's something that has stayed with me for now almost 40 years of being in elective office. Hi, yi, yi. And I look at this wonderful crowd, and I see a lot of motivated young women, and I'm really excited that you are yearning to make a difference. Every one of us wants to make a difference in our lives, and in our families' lives, and in our community. So we need you. You might be thinking, what do I have to contribute? You have so much to contribute, and we undervalue ourselves so much. But we need you. We need women leaders who are able to step up and tackle our nation's problems. And oh my gosh, you just put on the TV and you see all of the problems surrounding us. And when I was first elected to Congress in 1989, and I'm not going to ask you how many of you were not born in 1989. There's going to be a lot of hands. I was only one of 31 women in the House and Senate combined. One of 31. And now, so many years later, I'm so proud to see the number of women going up to over 100 and shows no sign of slowing down. So what a great change in just a little bit of time. As an old lady, I can say that's a little bit of time that I've been here. So you can imagine how much it's going to change when you get a hold of, when you hold the reins to our country. And there's this common misconception that women only care about softer issues, and those are important too. I'm not downplaying the softer issues, but women can bring to the table a perspective on all the issues. You know that. And it may be trite, and you may say, oh, what? Of course, you don't even need to say it, but we do need to say it, because some folks just don't get it. But we know what it's like to do a budget. We do it at home. Lots of single moms, moms running their own business there in around the kitchen table and having their own family. But we are also fearless leaders, and we've got to step up to the plate. We've got to encourage one another and build that community that we were talking about. And I was elected to Congress in a special election. A gentleman had passed away in office, Claude Pepper. He was here when Medicare, he founded Medicare, Social Security. This man was laid in state in the Capitol. He was really a big cheese, a good man, a very good man. And when I got here, I wasn't supposed to win, because we had 15 people running for that seat. Half in the Republican, I'm a Republican primary, and the other half in the Democratic primary. And I wasn't supposed to win, but yet here I am. And I became the first Hispanic woman to serve in Congress. And I didn't even know it. It was a tough election, nasty. And Katie Couric of the Today Show had invited me to come on. I figured, well, it's already 3 a.m. What's 3 more hours? Sure, I'll go on. And she says, how does it feel, Ileana, to be the first Hispanic woman? I said, well, Katie, I don't want to correct you on national TV, but I'm pretty sure I'm not the first Hispanic woman, but what a thrill to be in Congress. And she says, oh, no, we've done our research. You are the first. So I would have never thought that there had not been a Hispanic woman before. And I also became, thanks to some wonderful friends, and I'm going to talk about them in a second, because we all need friends to get to where we are. The first Hispanic woman to chair the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. And what a thrill. And it's because I never accepted no as an answer. As you heard, my family and I came over to the United States when I was only 8. We fled communist aggression in Cuba. And even though my dad had a college degree, and my mom, she was very accomplished as well, they took tough jobs, And my dad even went back to school and graduated from community college, graduated from the University of Miami, and he was working in the laundromat, picking up people's dirty laundry. And my mom worked at a hotel in Miami Beach, putting out desserts for the snowbirds who would come down for the season. And my parents taught me that there's dignity in all work, no matter what you do. You know, you can learn something from everyone and in every situation. And I just could not believe that I was surrounded, that I became a member of Congress. And Dante Fasel, another great man, also passed away from Miami-Dade County. He was chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee. And there was no room at the inn. There had no vacancies. And Dante took me under his wing. He was a Democrat. And he said, we're gonna change the ratio. We're gonna get you a spot. And honest to goodness, it was like a little, I love interns, but there was like a little intern desk. You know, we have so many wonderful young volunteers. We don't have any place to put them. We get this little card table. And that's where I spent my first couple of years in the House Foreign Affairs Committee. And to think that I became the chairman. I went from that little intern desk to chair that committee. But it's because of good people who helped me, and I'm always thankful for leadership all around me. You can learn good things even from rascals. Everybody can teach us something. And what a wonderful opportunity to start shaping the policy of the United States of America. It's unbelievable. And then the Republicans took over. Newt Gingrich was our speaker, and I became chairman of the Africa subcommittee. And I've been a strong advocate of U.S. core values and promoting democracy and freedom and the rule of law, because I lost my homeland to communism, so I know what it's like to speak out in favor of freedom. And this was way before we had terrible groups that are now commonly known, like Boko Haram, who kidnapped all those girls. And we had all of those extremist groups even way back when, although we didn't really give it a name then. And my message to you is that there's never a challenge that's too big. If I had thought about it and I said, gosh, what do I know about the Africa, 2 minutes left, what do I know about the Africa subcommittee, about the continent of Africa? Will I hold myself back until I know everything? No, I threw myself in there, and I've succeeded because I've never forgotten where I'm from, and more importantly, I never forget the people I represent. And I always think of my mom and dad working at these humble jobs, and the next lady you're going to be listening to, Stephanie Murphy, oh my gosh, what a great role model she is. And you're in the prime of your life. Thank you. You are vodka? Gin? But just be open to new ideas. Everyone's going to have a good idea. Be open for new opportunities. And I know that you can do it. I would have never thought that I would be here. And when I see that Capitol Dome lit up, and I know Stephanie thinks that way too, I've got to pinch myself. And I want you to have those pinchable moments where you say, wow, I can't believe that this happened. But it wasn't just because of you. It happened because of all the people who helped you get to where you are. So thank people, even not so great folks, because they'll taught you a lesson about not trusting that kind of person and trusting the other person. But you can learn. Everyone has a lesson for you. Be open for those lessons, and let's help each other out. Muchísimas gracias y muy agradecida. Thank you. Thank you. You're very nice. Thank you. No. Everybody's got a Miami connection. See, thank you.
I know. I'm gonna age myself and fangirl. I remember Claude Pepper and Dante Fasel. I grew up in Miami-Dade, Florida. You were an incredible inspiration then, and you are now, Representative. Thank you. Well, not to brag, but I'm actually the next lady. And I think I am going to kill it on this one. And then we have more incredible women for you to get to. But I'm actually going to come out from behind the podium, because that's how I like to roll. And in your bags tonight, you were given a worksheet that says vision, values, and mission on it. So hopefully that's in your, if you had a bag tonight, it might be in your Le Fleur bag. Thank you for the dress. Or under your chair. Although we are not Oprah and we are not giving away anything else tonight. So you do have a handout, though. I just wanted you to get that ready because you've heard now from disruptors and pioneers and visionaries, and I want you to imagine yourself in that same capacity. So we're going to get a little bit into the work that I do and the work that I bring to corporations around the globe. We started off the evening talking about getting 250,000 women to run by 2030. So we all know we want that, and my question is, why aren't more women running right now? Why are we waiting? I want to talk a little bit about the fears and the self-doubt, the personal narrative that we have that helps to shape our mission in life, that helps to shape the way we think about the world. And one of the things that got me interested in having these conversations was that I would meet incredible women and girls all over the world. I've been speaking for over 25 years. Whether girls were wearing burqas or Birkenstocks, I heard the same thing, which was that they were afraid that somebody would laugh at them. They didn't want to be judged. And I know from my own personal experience that many women are held within this belief system that their appearance actually equals their value system in the world. And their appearance and their looks equal their success. But we get these messages through a number of different ways, right? And this is what really set me out on the path over 2 decades ago. We know that as young women, we all sort of battle, perhaps, with these voices in our head, these limiting voices that tell us that we should be quieter. We should be more polite. We should be softer than our male counterparts. We should keep our dresses clean or our tummies tight. And we should focus on other people's winning and achievements. I also know from doing research over these past 2 decades that 6 out of 10 girls will stop doing something they love based on how they feel about the way they look. 6 out of 10. So 60% of girls won't raise their hand in class. They won't run for office, like my friend Christian Harold here, who has run for office since, how old were you when you first ran for office, Christian? You were 12. So girls won't raise their hand in class. They won't run for office. They won't go to their swim meets or to their gymnastics meets because they don't like the way their thighs look in their leotards or their bathing suits. And they'll spend an inordinate amount of time stopping themselves from doing the things that they love. Now, those are young girls. We also know that by the age of 14, girls would often rather be liked than be considered a leader. So why is that? Well, look, all you have to do is tune into the narrative of what we say when we talk about women in leadership. There are 2 B words. Sorry, ladies in the front row. One that I'm sure we talk about them being bossy, and for women, we talk about us being a bitch. So those words haunt young girls that we interview, that we talk to, that we focus on, and they say they'd much rather be liked than to step into a role of leadership. So how then, if we're setting up a path for ourselves, where we spend a crazy amount of time thinking about what we look like in deference to pleasing some societal standard of beauty or representation, and we don't spend enough time thinking about or talking about the things we heard tonight from these speakers so far, investing in ourselves, imagining a future, envisioning a world where we're more generous and gracious and kind to each other, and we lead towards the vision of the world that we want to create. So how do we get there? And my answer to you is that it's messy work. It's the work of self-discovery. It's quieter work, but it is not easier work. But we are doing the work here tonight. So what I wanted to do actually was share with you something that I not only do, I teach at USC. This is a workshop that I do with my class, who are all graduate students and undergraduate students with a vision for changing the world and oftentimes not knowing where to start. And for those of you who are considering running for office, I've done this at events before with our partners at Ignite and with the United States of Women. And I'm happy to do this exercise with you tonight. We're going to do it pretty quick. I gave you the worksheet so that you can take it home and use it again. It's actually something I do every 6 months. I go back and revisit my vision, my values, and my mission, because we can talk a great game. I've been in the business of empowerment for 25 years. I have heard us talk about wanting to change the way we feel empowered in the world. And I now have to tell you, it's great. The talk has been out there. We're all on board. Everybody feels like this is a great thing. Brands and businesses use this quite a bit to market to us. But in order for us to actually create that change, we have to start from within. So I'm going to ask you to go along on this little journey with me right now. So in front of on your paper, you've got the word vision. What I want you to do, if you have a pen, that's awesome. Take out that pen now and you can use that. If you don't have a pen and you want to just close your eyes, I want you to imagine this. I want you to imagine what your vision is. So what is the vision that gets you out of bed in the morning? What is that 30,000-foot view? What gets you out of bed? Is it your family? Is it your work? Is it a desire to change a part of your community, your environment? Is it your passion to run for office? Whatever that is yours. But I'd love for you to think very clearly about your vision. What gets you out of bed in the morning? What is your big picture view? So I want you to think about that for a second. Anybody who that came very easy to, who knew that right away, what their vision is? Yes, ma'am. Do you mind sharing?
No, I will say that I do this too, so.
Awesome. Okay. It's all right. There's no rules on this one.
But I do all the time too. So for me, what I do is I help people be able to articulate their vision. And what I love doing and why this mission is exciting for me, because instead of running for office, my goal is to help other people be persuasive enough to affect even greater change.
Amazing.
Instead of reaching one, I can reach many.
Amazing. That is a very strong vision. Who else has a vision that came to mind as you were thinking about this? Do you have one, Ella? Are you thinking of one? Yeah. Hold on.
When I get out of bed on the weekends,
Yeah.
sometimes I think of me playing soccer because on the weekends I play soccer and I love the sport soccer.
You love it. So does it get you so excited? And you play that on the weekends? Awesome. How many of you feel like Ella about a sport of some kind? Or your coffee, perhaps? There you go. We're just going to play to the crowd that's here. Thank you for sharing that. So vision is really important because you cannot change the world without beginning to change yourself. You cannot. We cannot go to the places that we want to go if we don't actually have a clear vision, right? So I revisit this vision because here's the other headline. It changes, and it should. It will change as we grow and we grow up. It will change as our values change, which we're going to get to next. So I want you to think about the vision that you have. Where was it given to you from? Was it from your parents, your community, your upbringing? Is it something deep inside of you that you're maybe scared to admit or maybe delighted to admit? What is that vision that gets you out of bed? That will be a good indicator for you of how to use and spend your time. I want to go to the values section really quick. Now, I use values in this term. I talk about values as being something that's non-negotiable in your life. So if you were to close your eyes right now or with your pen, think about 3 things that are absolutely non-negotiable for you. 3 values that you hold most dear. 3 beliefs that you have that you will not shift or change for anything or anyone. I do this a lot with my students who are getting ready to go into the job market, and everything's up for negotiation because they're looking, to pay off student debt. But it's also really important as we go through this world as leaders to know what we stand on foundationally. And it's surprising because many of us are given values through religion, we're given values through our family upbringing, we're given values from culture. But one of the things we don't often think about is what is your value system? What is your moral compass? What is your red light, green light about things that you will go for or not go for? So I would love if somebody's got a value that they can think of right away that is they know is non-negotiable for them. Yes, ma'am. Bingo. Honesty and integrity, non-negotiable value. Any other values that you're thinking about? Consistency and compassion. Excellent. Any others? Yes. Independence. I've heard that a lot. Yes. Back. Passion. Yes. So what's so beautiful about actually naming these things out loud and in a room full of very powerful manifestors? Ella, what's your value? Yeah. Respect and responsibility. We have a job for you, Ella. It's called POTUS. Okay, so one of the things that's really, really, really important for us is to actually to name those and claim those values, because otherwise it gets shaped by other people's needs and desires, right? So having a strong vision is important. Knowing your values is important. And then lastly, we're going to go to mission. So mission also has lots of different definitions. This is how I use it. I use mission as an action statement. One thing that I can do every day that brings me closer to that vision. So think about that right now. Think about what you've imagined as your vision, what gets you out of bed in the morning, what's non-negotiable for you, and then your mission is really what can you do every single day to get you closer to that goal, closer to that vision. Because so many people sit and think about running for office and it feels very far away. Or they think about running for student council and it feels really too big to accomplish. Or they think about starting their business and they have no idea how they're going to get that funded or where they're going to start. We all have those same feelings, even the most successful of them. So this is actually a great exercise just to distill down some very micro moments that you can do to help you move towards that vision. So does somebody related to their vision and their values have a mission statement, have something that they know they can do, take a step towards every single day to bring them closer to that 30,000-foot view? Yes. Great. Amazing. And so what is one thing that you do, like in an action step way, that brings you there?
Proactively reaching out to the creators and the staff in these organizations to connect with them.
Excellent. Excellent. Any other last mission? Yes. Yes.
So I'm a big advocate and activist, and I do a lot of education and seminars around it. So I think it's very integral part.
Excellent. So, and actually, I would even take that one step further. Many people that do this exercise will also say their mission or their step of action that they do every day is take care of and have their own self-care. In order to be able to give back to the world, we have to sort of fill it up. I always use the analogy of a gas tank. We can't run our cars on no gas at all, and we always have to refill to keep going. And this is something that we often we'll often sort of leave to the side, is like, how do we take care of ourselves? How do we tend to our own mind, our own body, our own spirit? How do we shift and grow with these visions and these values? So here's something I'll invite you to do. I zoomed through this exercise, which usually takes a lot longer, but here's why you're so incredible. You played along. You shared already in this room some of these visions and values, and it probably stimulated some ideas for you, right? So one thing I'm going to invite you to do is, as you're talking to young women who are considering running for office, or any woman who's considering running for office, as you begin to look at yourself as a leader in your own life, how do we challenge the narrative that you might have created, we might have created for ourselves, that tells us we're not good enough, we're not strong enough, smart enough, thin enough, pretty enough, whatever the enough is, right, to get there? Because we have a lot of systems to fight. There's incredible systemic change for us to make, and we're doing that. But there's also a system to fight inside of us, which is this narrative that we've created. And oftentimes for young women that I work with, that narrative is so strong. It's the predominant voice that they hear. Before we can ever go out and conquer the rest of the world, we've got to figure out the origin of that voice and how to bypass that. So this exercise hopefully gives you a reflection point for you on how we can change that personal narrative. So with that, take that, you use it again, share it. I'm happy to share that out into the world. It's one of those simple mission statements that I created to help me get more and more connected to the vision, which is why I'm so happy to serve on this board and to be here with you tonight. So in that vision and in that mode of taking action, I want to shift the conversation a bit tonight, and I'll invite our podium movers to come on up and move this while I'm chatting. We're going to shift our program a little bit. You had incredible, powerful speakers to start, and now I want to invite you into some intimate conversations. And when we were thinking about how do we create the best intimate conversation for a program like this, there is nobody better to do that than my friend Dylan McGee. So I'm going to first kind of introduce you to Dylan and her incredibleness. The revolution starts with a single action, that first commitment to running for office, and that's what Dylan's going to be here to help us explore tonight. She is the founder and executive producer of Makers, and if you have never witnessed Makers, I encourage you to do so. She's a master storyteller known for unearthing and preserving the hidden stories of America's greatest female pioneers. Tonight, she has the pleasure of interviewing Baltimore State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby and Representative Stephanie Murphy, who you heard the other representative mention, on the challenges and successes that they faced along their journey to public office. So Dylan, I pass this mic over to you. Take it away, my lady. There you go, Mother.
All right, so I see you. Come on up. We're meeting for the first time, so I have to give her a hug. State's Attorney Mosby. So nice to meet you. And where's the Congresswoman? Hello. So nice to meet you. Have a seat. I love this, meeting on the fly. Wow. Jess, you were amazing. That was such a fun exercise to go through. I don't know about you. I knew we were up next, so I wasn't filling out my form. But as Jess said, I'm the founder of Makers, and it's the largest collection of women's stories ever assembled. You know, I had a vision. My vision was to go to Gloria Steinem and do a documentary on her life, and thank God she said no. Because then I had to tell the stories of all women to finally convince her to do it. And that was how Makers was created. That was my personal journey. But you know, we've done a documentary on women in politics, and it is so exciting to be here with you two to really get a sense of your journeys. Because I think, you know, Jess, you said at the beginning, it's about you know, unraveling those narratives of what a politician should be and what that looks like. And so I'm hoping by hearing about the two of you and your journeys, and did I see your daughters here?
Yeah.
Did I see two daughters there? Hello, wave. That we can convince them that she should run. Okay, so why don't we just start with, do you want to go? One of the cool things also about when you become an elected official, and I'm going to stop talking, is that you get to have these cool titles. Like I get to call you Congresswoman. You're Congresswoman Murphy. You know, you're not just Stephanie. So, Congresswoman, tell me about, you know, what I'd love to hear is when you were a little girl, your parents fled, you know, communist Vietnam, and you came here as a little girl. I believe the story is that your parents and you were on a boat that broke down, and the U.S. Navy found you and brought you here. So tell me a little bit about that journey, and as you were little, what your visions were.
So I, much like Ileana, you know, my family escaped a communist country. I was just 6 months old, so I don't remember the journey. But we did, our boat broke down in the South China Sea, and here we are adrift when a U.S. Navy ship rescued us. And it's from that moment that really developed in me this never-ending sort of love and commitment to this country, which kind of has led me to where I am today. But I'll be honest and say that when I was a little girl, I never dreamed about being a politician. An astronomer, you know, a doctor, lots of different paths, but not into politics.
And you grew up in Virginia?
I did grow up in Virginia.
So what did you think you would be?
Well, I literally thought I was going to be an astronomer when I was a child.
Good. I like those dreams.
But last cycle, you know, the rhetoric that was going on at the highest level really just didn't comport with the America I knew. And I was so distraught by it. And I have 2 small children as well. I wish I had brought them. But a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old, and my daughter is 3. And I just didn't want this to be the kind of world that they inherit from us, and that this is what they're going to have to live with. And I think the tipping point for me was the Pulse nightclub shooting happened in my community. And I thought, you know, you can't have people spewing hateful rhetoric and not expect to see it manifest itself in your own community somehow. And until we change the way Washington works and break up this dysfunction that's making people so angry and discontent, we're never going to be able to change the course of this country. And so that's how a woman who'd never run for public office or even student government before got into a race to run a 4-month campaign against a 24-year incumbent and then come out victorious.
And like Ros, am I right that you're a history maker too?
I'm the first Vietnamese American woman to serve in Congress.
And to your left, I believe we have another history maker. Aren't you the youngest?
I am.
The
youngest chief prosecutor of any major American city in the country.
And so, state's attorney, you grew up in Boston.
Yep.
And you had police officers in your family. I believe your grandfather was the first.
So yeah, I come from several generations of police officers. My grandfather was one of the founding members of the first black police organization in Massachusetts. So law enforcement was very much ingrained within me. They actually referred to our house as the police house within the community. And every time I came home, there was like somebody that I didn't know calling me a cousin or a family member. And I'm like, I don't know you. But I fast forward, and I tell you that story because just recently, about 3 months ago, I was in a coffee shop in Baltimore, and this man walked up to me and he said, "Aren't you the state's attorney?" I said, "Yeah, I am." He was like, "Well, I just want to come over and I want to thank you." I said, "Well, thank me for what?" He said, "I want to thank you for Mr. T. Mr. T was my grandfather. He passed away when I got sworn in that same year in February. And he said, Mr. T changed my life. You see, I was one of those knucklehead kids from your neighborhood that was always in your house. And he changed the course of my life. And I just wanted to thank you because I know that he's since passed." But I fast forward. That was, my grandfather was a paternal sort of figure, not just for my family,
And so did you
but for
see
the
yourself
community.
as a police officer? Is that what you were going to be?
So no, I never saw myself as a police officer.
Okay.
But I did see myself as an attorney. I knew I wanted to be an attorney. I mean, we constantly had political, arguments in the house, and we always talked about politics. But it was actually a tragedy that happened when my cousin, when I was 14, he was killed right outside of our home in broad daylight when he was mistaken as a neighborhood drug dealer. And he was actually an honors student with dreams and aspirations of going on to college. And so this very image is still branded in my mind because when I opened up my door, I saw him laying in the streets. But it was this image and this tragedy that kind of spawned my passion. If it wasn't for a neighbor who cooperated with police and testified in court, my family wouldn't have received any sort of justice. But having to go into a courtroom, for the first time, I had been into the police station with my mom and my dad and my uncles, on Friday nights. I thought it was pretty cool. But this was my first time actually going into a courtroom and seeing this young man with my cousin who had all these dreams, aspirations going to a grave. The individual responsible for his death was also 17. And then seeing the number of African American men coming in and out in chains and shackles, it bothered me. And I said, well, what is this system and how could we have reformed it so that we could have gotten to that young man before he elected to take my cousin's life? So that tragedy kind of spawned my passion to reform the criminal justice system.
Amazing. All right, so you both did it. You had that aha moment. You decided, I'm going to run. But as you were running, what were the stumbling blocks? Like, what were the challenges, and how did you overcome them?
I think one of the major challenges for me was that people underestimated me at every turn, right? So I'm a young woman of color, and so I was called a nothing burger. My opponent referred to me not just as, nobody would know her from Adam, not just Adam, Adam's house cat. So nobody would know her from Adam's house cat because I didn't rank the male comparison. And I think for me, whenever that happened, I just dug in deeper. And I have a saying that when you're underestimated or someone's selling you short, you kill them with competence. And so we just put together a really strong campaign and went out and talked to voters. And I would tell voters, the average voter, your vote matters as much as these echo chamber people who think that they're a part of the establishment in this community. Your vote matters just as much.
So what I can say is I kind of sat down with any and every politician there was, and community leader, clergy leader, and asked for support in my endeavor. And it was so funny because I can remember sitting down for hours with folks and then believing in my vision for the office. And they had optimism for my vision, but skepticism in my ability to carry out my vision. And I was actually at a workshop around women leadership and elected positions. And one of the things that they talked about is they were talking about how behavioral scientists say that women, we suffer from what is called a confidence gap, right? Like we'll apply for promotions, take risks, run for office when we meet all the requisite criteria, while men, on the other hand, do those same things when they only meet half. And so one of the questions that they posed was, if not me, then who? If not now, then when? And so, it was really about channeling that confidence and saying, why not me? I'm just as experienced as anyone else. And if not, I have more experience and I'm bringing, more to the table. So it was really something that I had to channel that confidence. And in the end, I beat an incumbent that outraised me 4-1 by double-digit percentage points.
Okay, 5 minutes left, and I have a little fun thing I want to do at the end, so that really means 3. Okay, so how fun is it? Are you enjoying it? Like, let's encourage these women. Like, there were those challenges, but aren't we having fun now?
I feel like I've been in office for 35 and a half years. It's been like 2 years and 11 months. Yes, it's fun. Yes, girls, it's fun.
But what do you love about it, really?
I mean, honestly, what keeps me going is that understanding and recognizing that it's greater than you individually, right? Like when you think about the role of a prosecutor, prosecutors are the ones who decide who's going to be charged, what they're going to be charged with, what sentence recommendations they're going to make. It's a powerful sort of position. And we think about the sort of progressive need for reform that often comes through prosecutors. But what you cannot ignore when you look at the disproportionate impact that it has had, that discretion has had on communities of color, you can't ignore the fact that 95% of the prosecutors in this country are white, 79% are white men, and as a woman of color, I represent 1% of all elected prosecutors in this country. And so every day that I go to work, I understand and I make sacrifices. I have a 7 and a 9-year-old, just like you do. Where'd you go? Yeah, just like you. And you make these sacrifices, but it's so much greater than you individually. And learning not to internalize it and understanding that it's not you, but rather what you represent.
So I've been serving since January, and I'll admit it does feel like dog years. But I am having fun. I think, it's a mixed bag. There are challenges, certainly. But I think in addition to the legislative wins that my office is making or the difference that we're making in the lives of our constituents, I think one of the things that I didn't expect but has been so rewarding for me, I can't tell you the number of constituents I have who will say to me, it's usually the dads, who will say, I have a little girl I adopted from China, or my daughter is half Asian, and they look at you and are so inspired. And that to me matters, and it reminds me that our words mean something, and the example that we set means something, and that's sort of a part of a bigger picture than just the day-to-day what legislation am I like trying to get through.
Well, you are both incredible role models, and at the end we're going to do a roaring applause because we want to keep you both in office as long as we can. But before that, we want to show everyone on this live stream and in the room that politicians can have fun too, right? So stand up. Okay, so this is something called the Maker's Minute, and again, I hate to bring up Gloria Steinem, but she's the winner of this exercise. It's true, I swear. And what we do is we try to get through as many questions as we can in a minute. Okay? And you two are a team. Okay? So you each, I'll go back and forth, and you just answer the first thing that comes to your mind. Okay? So if I said like coffee or tea, you'd say coffee or tea or whatever. They're not hard questions. Well, I mean, So, but the key is to speed, right? So the record is 16. And I have 17 questions down here. Okay. Blair, who is on the Makers team, are you ready? Ready with the timer? Okay, everyone, let's cheer him on. Here we go. Okay. Say on your mark, get set, go. Mark, get set, go. Best word to describe you?
Confident.
Sunrise or sunset?
Sunset.
A female who inspires you?
Hillary Clinton.
Something that makes you hopeful?
My children.
Something that pisses you off?
Men who underestimate me.
Yes, something you're afraid of.
Something afraid of? Nothing.
If you could be any other woman on earth for one day, who would it be?
Beyonce.
Something you wish you did more often.
Run.
Something you wish you did less often.
Worry.
Something you've never tried but would like to.
Trapeze act.
Ah, nice. If you could change one thing for the next generation of women, what would it be?
Self-confidence.
Favorite things about your job? favorite thing about your job?
The children.
Yes. What's your biggest vice?
Coffee.
Headline you'd like to see on the cover of the New York Times tomorrow morning?
Re-election of Marilyn Mosby for state's attorney.
Yes! And ladies and gentlemen, we are out of time, and you guys are...
Oh my God. That is why Dylan McGee is queen. Thank you so much. So good to meet you. That was awesome. All right, we're going to pull the podium back on because the fun just keeps happening. All right. That was awesome. So our next speaker is... Bye, everybody. Our next speaker is Mayor Muriel Bowser. She leads with a bold style and has reinvigorated our nation's capital, whether making historic investments in education reform or preserving and protecting affordable housing for the city's most vulnerable. Mayor Bowser is committed to making sure every Washingtonian gets their fair shot. Through her work, she is actively creating a new culture of inclusion, transparency, and action for one of the nation's largest economies. Mayor Bowser will discuss how her role as a female leader helps in problem solving and how women's leadership is changing the political landscape right now. Please help me in welcoming Mayor Bowser.
Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Washington, D.C. It's wonderful to have you here, and I always start a conversation like this when I'm welcoming folks from all over our nation, that I represent 680,000 disenfranchised Washingtonians. So what do I mean by that? It means we pay taxes. We're just like every other American, except we don't have voting senators or a voting congresswoman. So when we think about how she should run, we know if we have more women in the Congress, that fact will change. So I support women running for office. Let me just say that I celebrated 10 years in elective office back in May. I am now embarking on my 6th election, and I've won them all. And so I'm going to go and ask the people of Washington, D.C. to support me once again. So I know the goal of this organization is to encourage more women to run. I couldn't agree with the state's attorney more when she said one of the biggest obstacles to us running is us. We think we're not good enough. We think we're not ready. We think we could do more. We think we can wait till the next time. And unqualified men don't have those same conversations with themselves. So we are, and I encourage each and every one of you, if running is in your heart, then you definitely should lay out your plans. Maybe it's next year, maybe it's in 5 years, but get yourself on the path to doing it. When I think about the very first decisions that put me on the path to running for office, it was really where I decided to buy a home. That was like the first decision that put me on the path. I chose a great neighborhood. It was good, actually, and it could be better. And when I moved to that neighborhood, I decided to run for the very first and lowest office in our city that's actually a volunteer office. It's called the Office of the Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner. But if I had decided to move to another neighborhood that was perfect or move out of the city even, I would not be on the path to run. Another decision I made was the best way if you're an advisory neighborhood commissioner to get things done is to know other elected officials in your town. So I made it a point to know my council member and know the mayor and know all of the city's council members. And when they were involved in elections, I wanted to learn how it worked, so I volunteered. And I took on every role. Now, the role that I encourage a lot of women to get involved in is fundraising. How many people like to fundraise? Raise your hands, ladies, because you do have to like to fundraise to get this done. And it's okay, because we have to make sure that we're putting ourselves in the circles that get somebody to support us, get lots of people to support us. The other thing I encourage people to do is get a mentor. Sometimes it will be a woman, sometimes it'll be a man. And find a person who is going to help take you to the circles that are outside of your orbit, so that you can learn about different neighborhoods, different groups, different needs, and find different stakeholder groups that will be supportive of you. And I think when you do all of those things, you would have put yourself on the path to make a decision about whether to run or not. But what is most important is that you have big ideas and a big vision, and you can explain to the people that you would represent why electing you adds value to their lives, why they can trust you with their vote, with their hopes, with their dreams, with their aspirations, with their children, with their tax dollars, with their good reputations. And when you can make that explanation and make that pitch, then you're almost ready to run. You're even more ready to run when you can look at your electorate and lay out a path of how you win. Now, I'm not one of those people that believe you should run for experience or run to build your name recognition for the next race. I'm not one of those people. I think you run when you know you have a path to win. And then that way you can go out and very confidently talk to your voters about your vision, talk to potential supporters about why they should contribute to your campaign. And then if you're very lucky and everything works and you've worked as hard as you can, you will win. And when you win, you have the awesome opportunity and responsibility to govern. And I have had that great responsibility to govern for the last 3 years in the greatest city in the world. And it is a particular challenge to be a woman and to run a major American city. I think the count now of women running major American cities, 500,000 and above, is less than 20. In all of the United States of America. The job of the mayor is critically important, especially now when we don't have the type of productivity, shall I say, at the national level, and when a lot of what's coming out sometimes challenges the work that we have to do in cities. The job of the mayor is so much more important. I frequently say that the female politician is more frequently criticized, more quickly criticized, and more wrongly criticized. And I sat with a gentleman who's very powerful in Maryland, and older guy who's been around, he told me he had ultimate power. And I said, really? Wow, how do you get ultimate power in our states? And then he went on to tell me why women had failed, at no fault of their own, but because they were judged so much differently than he had been judged, and he was judged. And so as the folks prior to me coming on have said, you have to put all of that criticism to the side. I love the comment that the Congresswoman made about killing people with competence, because that's so important. When you do your job and you work harder than they do, and you're smarter than they are, the voters will recognize it and reward you with their support and with their votes. I think it's critically important for women to be in the pipeline, to be on the ballot, and to be in office. But the only way we will get there is if more women run. So I am very encouraged by the number of women who are expressing interest in running for office. Not everybody's going to win. Not everybody should win, but everybody should be looking for the opportunity to make their difference in elective office. People was asked of the earlier presenters, what did you think you would be? I wasn't quite sure. I knew I would be in government. I thought I would run a government agency. I decided early on that local was for me, not federal or national, but I soon realized in working in a bureaucracy that being in elective office was the fastest way way to make the most change for the most people. That's why I ran. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Incredible. Thank you, Mayor. Incredible, incredible. We have more incredible coming. All right, in our next set change, I want to focus on a new panel discussion. As Aaron and Claire mentioned tonight, we are so fortunate to have Refinery 29 as one of our partners in this evening, and I am delighted to introduce you to our next moderator, Bourrée Lam. She's the senior editor of Work and Money at Refinery 29, and she's going to explore, with the help of an incredible panel, how the media narrative both helps and harms female candidates and women leaders overall. Joining her on this panel is Representative Bonnie Watson-Coleman of New Jersey, Representative Brenda Lawrence of Michigan's 14th District, and Sarah Chamberlain, President and CEO of the Republican Mainstream Partnership, and Jay Newton-Small, author of Broad Influence, How Women Are Changing the Way America Works. So ladies, come on and do your thing.
Hi, so we're here to talk about women and the media, and we know how the media can be helpful but also harmful for female leaders, so hopefully we'll get into some challenges, some solutions, and some tactics if you have some to share for women running for office. So to kick things off, I have a question for everyone on the panel. Do you feel like female politicians have to do something drastic to get media attention, and how do you handle that media attention when it comes to you?
Well, from my personal perspective, I think we do have to do something that's exceptional. It isn't always something that we've done. It could be something that someone in our family did, or it could be something that came at us. Most recent experience I have that I think of is what happened to Representative Frederica Wilson. How the press treated that situation, how the media gave that any kind of credibility when the White House, the President of the United States, and his chief of staff disparaged her in such disrespectful ways. And I thought that the media had an interesting time of just keeping that story going, but not necessarily dealing with the real problem that it identified. And then I didn't think that enough people came to her rescue, particularly the women's activist organizations. I know as black women, we belong to the Black Caucus, Congresswoman Lawrence and I, and the Black Caucus comes to the defense of everybody and anybody, let it be LGBT, women, immigrants, whatever. But we did feel that there wasn't that reciprocity. And so I think between the media doing what it was doing and sort of the activists not doing what I thought it should be doing, it created this very not unhealthy, but unfair situation that was very hurtful.
Hello, I'm a firm believer that the relationship and the power brokering that happened with men, that's on the golf course, that's at the bar, that's at those special men circles, that they form those relationships where they're automatically connected to power, and then power surrounds them and promote them. Women, we're typically on the ground with grassroots where there isn't that power elevator, so we can do amazing things and it never gets to the press. But a man can go out and pick up a piece of paper off the street and it's a news clip, amazing. The mayor picked up paper off the street, where it could be a woman who has literally picked a child up, gave him CPR, rushed him to the hospital, stitched him up herself while she was taking him there, and there would be nothing in the paper. But I do want to say this, is that it does not deter me, because while it may not make it to the paper, in politics and as a public servant, the people see your work. And sometimes women get frustrated and they get so caught on, like, I'm not on the camera, I'm not on the camera. Sometimes I have those moments, but then I can walk in a room and of 100 people and they'll say, thank you. I saw what you did. And you have to stay true to that and don't get distracted by the media. But the other thing is form those relationships. When you see media people in the room, meet them, take their cards, talk to them, when it's a good story. Because when there's a bad story, you'll probably need to talk to them as well.
So on the Republican side, we do struggle getting our women in front of the camera, and sometimes we do it to ourselves. You'll see when we were at the White House with the ACA bill that the House passed, they're all white men standing there. When you point that out to the white men, because I have a lot of members of Main Street who are gentlemen, they're like, oh, didn't realize it. So what Main Street is doing, having it run by a woman, is we're trying to re-educate the men that yes, you do have to have the women out front. But very few of my women get any media coverage. I mean, the youngest woman ever elected to Congress is a member of Main Street, Elise Stefanik. I mean, probably half of you in here don't know who she is, but yet she's a very impressive woman. So we really struggle to get through to the media.
I feel like my role is going to be to defend the media tonight as a member of the media. So I'm a longtime Time magazine correspondent before I wrote my book, Broad Influence. I remain a contributor to Time. And I will say that a lot of women don't ever try to forge relationships with me. Like when I was covering Congress and I was covering Washington, the men were super aggressive and like approaching me, asking me out for coffee, asking me out for lunch, sometimes a little too aggressive. And the women, and when I remember researching my book and I interviewed, my book grew out of a story that I wrote in 2013 about the 20 women in the Senate coming together to restart the negotiations to reopen the government when none of the men would talk to each other. And I interviewed all 20 women in the Senate for that book, and I was really struck in interviewing Deb Fischer, who is, probably nobody in this room knows who she is, but she's a Republican senator from Nebraska, and she's, and she is very low key. She takes very little attention for herself, and in fact, she very proudly told me when I was interviewing her that she had gone 8 years in the state Senate in Nebraska, chairing like one of the most powerful committees in that state. I think it was the Insurance Committee, and had never once given a press conference. And she actually did not give a press conference until she ran for Senate. And she was extremely proud of this fact. And so it tells you how really press shy a lot of these women are, and they feel like they have to be over prepared to talk to the press. They have to have every answer to every question set up in advance. I remember Carol Browner told me a great story about how when she was EPA administrator under Clinton, she used to prepare for days going into cabinet meetings about exactly what she'd say and what if this question was asked and what if that question was asked. And one meeting, President Clinton was, as he always does, run really, really late. And she was talking to two of her colleagues in the cabinet, and they were saying, she was like, how long did you prepare for this meeting? And they were like, I don't know, like 5 minutes. And she was like, seriously? And she realized that she was the only one in the cabinet like over preparing for these meetings. And so I think there is that tendency, I've seen it over and over again, for women to feel like they have to be so prepared to talk to the press because we're scary and we're going to ask things that they might not know. And I think I would just encourage you to there's something called off the record, right? And if you're not sure and you don't feel comfortable, just say, okay, let's take this off the record. I want to figure it out and I can get back to you. It doesn't have to be on the spot, like sudden death, and just feel and go try to don't feel like it's an adversarial relationship. Feel like it's a amicable relationship, and it probably will be an amicable relationship.
I think that's really good advice. So speaking of the news, everywhere in the news lately has been about sexual harassment. And so I was wondering if there's any advice you would give for women on how to combat sexual harassment. The conversation really started in Hollywood, but it certainly reached DC. And so what advice and any experiences you've had about sexual harassment in the political realm could you share with women who are entering politics maybe for the first time?
I would say this. I was a EO investigator prior to coming to Congress and was a manager of training in a federal agency where I was responsible for training managers in sexual harassment. You know, it's interesting in this Me Too arena that we're in now. It is extremely important, and I'm saying this personally to women, if you feel it's creepy, if you feel that it is not acceptable, we're seeing a lot of women come forward where they were silent for years, and the behavior was allowed to be repeated. It is important for you to speak up and say, you know, this is creepy. I don't like that. You know, like you're stop touching me. Don't look at me that way, or can you give me, you're in my space. But now it's this awareness I'm so proud of, but you're gonna have to understand that if you don't speak up, we have the right to work in an environment that's free of sexual rights. So let's talk about politics. Ladies, I can't tell you how many times I've been the only woman in the room, or the only woman that is that's part of the conversation. More usual is the dismissiveness of men when you are at the table and you have just as much power as them, because you wouldn't be in the room and really not at the table unless you had the credentials, the experience, and the authority to be there. And they would literally like, oh, well, we'll talk to you later, or I want to know what everyone thinks, and they get to you, okay, I think we have enough. And having that confidence to say, no, you don't have enough because I haven't contributed yet. And don't get mad about it, because so often women will become angry, and then we check the box of, you know, the word that they like to give us when we get emotional. So don't get angry about it. It is important that you understand when you walk in the room, 9 times out of 10, you're going to have to assert yourself. You're going to be ignored, so don't be prepared for it and speak up. And if if you say, you know, you've gone around table 3 times and I have not had a chance to speak, I really have something to add. Not you so-and-so and so, why didn't you call on me? That doesn't solve the problem. And so we as women with this Me Too, I just want to tell you, it breaks my heart that I'm hearing of horrific events that were 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and I never said anything. And now there's women that come after you that are going to suffer because you were silent. It is important now in this Me Too, learn from that. As we see people being named, we could have stopped the behavior. So thank you.
So I have run the Republican Main Street Partnership since I got out of college. And this has all been coming up. And I had one congressman, very powerful, chairman of a committee. I said, I understand, you know, this is coming. There's been some stories, like Mary Bono spoke out and some people spoke out. And he said to me, he said, do you ever feel it? You're always the only woman in the room. And I said, no, because I always know that there's 3 or 4 of you in this room that have my back. And you'll make sure that if anything is ever said to me, that it would never be done again. And that's been very important. And Fred Upton is the gentleman I'm speaking about. He's like, yeah, he said, you know, we would always protect you. And some of it, too, is your body language. It's going to happen, but it's the body language and how you make sure you kind of guard yourself to make sure it doesn't happen. That's what happens to me. I mean, I'm only giving you a personal example of, you know, they protect me, and I do not get harassed at all.
I think that we have to be careful about seeing ourselves as the cause for an assault upon who we are, because, you know, I worked in civil rights for years before becoming an elected official, and it is easy for the victim to feel as if she's the cause of what's happening to her. It is not that your dress is too short. It is not that you're walking in a provocative way, or that you look or you cross your legs or whatever. It's not your problem. You're not the problem. The person who is assaulting you in any way, shape, or form is the problem. And it's your responsibility to yourself to tell that person, stop immediately. I will not accept this. But it's also your responsibility to report it. Report it to someone who can do something about it. You know, the federal government is behind state governments. In the state of New Jersey, sexual harassment training is required. In the United States of America, had it not been for this woman right here who's put a resolution saying it should be required mandatory training here, we would still be behind the 8 ball on this.
Because right now in Congress it's optional, and the bill that I introduced, and Republicans and Democrats have signed on, men and women, saying that at the minimum it should be mandatory. We mandate ethics training, cybersecurity training, but sexual harassment training is optional. That should not be in our country.
So I'll just add to that. I have a column coming out this week that looks at critical mass. And so the idea that Congress has reached 20% women, and in the 113th session at least, the women of the Senate produced 75% of the legislation that was passed into law that session. So and, you know, Hollywood producers last year reached 26% women. So critical mass is somewhere between 20 and 30% in any body, whether it's a legislature like the Senate or a corporate board or a Navy ship or an appellate court. And there's a huge body of research out there that shows that when you reach this tipping point, you can't really go back. Like, it's like you completely change the culture of that institution. And that's why I think it's so important what's going on with She Should Run, is that they're looking to get us to that point, like, and obviously beyond it, but we're so close in so many places to getting to that tipping point, and we just need to get enough women to get over that hump, and then you really see the change. And the first change is that the casting couch culture goes away, and people, like the women in the Senate, start calling out sexual harassment in the military and other things like that. So that's why we need to get there.
Yeah, I think we can all get behind that. So can I get another round of applause for our panelists? Thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you. Speaking of the tipping point, we are going to move into what is She Should Run's secret sauce, which is our incubator program. So, yes. Here's the other awesome thing. We are talking about a super complex ecosystem of issues tonight. And so if anything, this conversation can share and show many different points of view. And one of the points of view that we wanted to have tonight, specifically for these women who have been a part of our incubator program, is that we wanted you to hear firsthand what happens when you enter an incubator program, what happens when you have decided to run, have been elected. What does this consistency need to look like? Because we have a lot of energy and momentum around getting women to run, and then we also now need to show up, keep them in office, keep supporting for the next generation. So I want you to meet Laura, Chelsea, Amanda, and Paula, who are all going to share the impact that the incubator program for She Should Run has had on their career and their life. Ladies, welcome.
That's okay. Awesome. Well, hello everyone. My name is Paula Phillips and I am from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So all of our Midwesterners, welcome. Thank you. And I was elected to the Milwaukee Public School Board this past April. And the reason why I ran for office was because a woman asked me if I would consider it. And I said, "That is so kind, but no thank you." And it took a few nudges, some gentle, some not so gentle, that eventually got me to that yes. And once I got to that yes, even though I had worked on local campaigns before, even though I am somebody that is comfortable speaking with other people, I realized something that Hillary Clinton once said, that campaigns are these massive enterprises of volunteers and support, but at the end of it, it's deeply personal and sometimes lonely. And in that loneliness, I definitely reached out for as many resources as I could. So I was a Emerge America alum, which is a group that trains women to run for office. I reached out to this group called New Politics that engages people that have been in the military, AmeriCorps, Peace Corps. And then by happenstance, I came upon She Should Run. And at first I thought, I've already got so many resources. I don't want to over ask. I don't want to think too hard about this, but I'll just add this to the list of things that I'm going to do. And Sophia can attest that during my campaign, having that space, that safe place to share about my vulnerabilities, of what it felt like to share those wins, was so important. Because it's like Representative Murphy said or State Attorney Mosby said, it made me feel like my story wasn't just mine, and that running for office wasn't just about me or my community, but it was about encouraging women to step out from the shadows and be in front of the work that we've been supporting all along. So I just want to thank She Should Run for bringing that group of women together. I think now in that Facebook incubator group, there's over 4,000, and allowing me to still be part of that, because as an elected official, I will still go back and see what questions people have, what doubts they might have, and say, yes, you can, or, you know what, maybe you should do more doors, because I will always say, do more doors, raise more money, don't buy yard signs, but that's just me. And I had a few listening sessions in my community. I authored my first resolution around nutrition, and we had 9 listening sessions all over the city. And during one of those sessions, we had a parent just really upset asking me, you know, how did we go from fresh baked bread to food sometimes that's unrecognizable on these students' plates? And I stopped and I thought, and then I said, you know, that happened because the administration years ago brought this idea to 9 people on this board, and they voted that we would change the way we served food to our kids. And we see now, years later, how that has affected our students. But now we have 9 other people that are interested in changing it, making higher quality foods, making sure that our students have everything that they need to be successful in the classroom. And I want to share that story because sometimes I think people think, why should I run for office? Why should I do these things? Because some of the things that you care about might have been decided by a vote. Some of the things that you're fighting for might have been decided by a small group, a large group, and until you're part of that table, you will not have the power that you need. So get out of the shadows, join She Should Running Incubator. I will comment on your post. And thank you guys so much. Let's all run for office.
Good evening. 6 years ago, I moved to San Carlos, California. My city, shout out. My city is a tidy 6 square miles of 30,000 on the San Francisco Peninsula, where residential areas, open space, light industry surround a very bountiful downtown. Tweens share lunch with their pals, and elders strut their showbiz skills in the Chicken's Ball variety show. My name is Laura Parmer-Lohan. Over the past 27 years, my other half and I have built a life together. Began careers, bought a home, started a family. We are a rainbow family. Like our neighbors, we value a safe community in which to raise our kids, good schools, cultural diversity, and having a roof over our heads. Soon after moving to San Carlos, I became involved in the community. I was a Little League coach, band parent, education foundation, photographer, and more. All the while starting a successful small business. On November 9th, 2016, I was stunned when my then 12-year-old son told me that he hated America. I needed to show him that we could be kind, considerate, and an inclusive country. It was time for me to change my business leadership skills into community leadership. But how do I do that? Luckily, a friend pointed me to She Should Run. I took the online course and learned that if I wanted to hold public office, I had better figure out how to be clear about why I was running. And I needed to surround myself with people who would help me be successful. At the live SSR one-day workshop in San Francisco, we learned that women began campaigns as often as men do, but drop out at far greater rates. Fear was the key driver. And I understood this because I had experienced those feelings when I started my own company. Yet, SSR persisted. They provided skills development and action planning tools to mitigate the risk and made running for office a realistic option. I began to publicly share my interest in city council, and I met Mike Gate-a-lot. He's a local political strategist, and he became a mentor. And not only that, but he introduced me to our community leaders. I began talking to these community leaders, and I learned that the challenges facing San Carlos are really not that different than what we're hearing on the national level. Despite our proximity to Silicon Valley and its incredible job growth, and I know you hear about these companies, the American dream is out of reach for many San Carlins. Demand for housing grossly exceeds supply. A modest 3-bedroom, $2 million. First responders, civil servants, teachers have all been locked out of homeownership. They face hours-long commutes. These are the very people that keep our community safe and attractive, and the schools of the quality that brought my family to that town in the first place. So, by taking a leadership by listening approach, I've attended neighborhood meetings, taken walking tours, been appointed to the Single Family Housing Advisory Committee, and enrolled in our Citizens Academy. These experiences have deepened my understanding of the challenges facing my community and bolstered my conviction to help address them. And that fear of losing? Well, it has turned into the fear of denying myself the opportunity to give back. It has turned me into wanting to make sure that my son can reclaim his civic trust and pride. Knowing that SSR has my back enables me to breathe a little bit easier, although you can't tell it right now. Think a little clearer and strengthen my resolve. And I am forever humbled to She Should Run.
Thank you.
Hi there, my name's Chelsea Wilson. I became a She Should Run frontrunner over a year ago, not long after being mentored by She Should Run's incredible executive director, Claire Bresnahan. In meeting Claire and in discussing our mutual desire to see more women in charge at every level, I finally got the extra push that I needed to decide that I wanted to run myself. So I now chair the She Should Run Frontrunners, and we're an amazing professional community of women in their 20s and 30s who live and work right here in the DC area. One of my favorite things we've done as a group is get together and collectively go through an incubator activity session together. And it's really amazing to sit in a living room full of women who you admire and talk about the issues that motivate us to run. And to me, this type of experience of sitting and huddling together captures the greatest features of the incubator. So the first is the flexibility to continue returning to your plan as you're working it, and the amazing community you need behind you to support you along the way. So late last year, through the help of the incubator, I began working a 5-year plan to run for local office, and I targeted leadership opportunities that I cared about and professional goals that I wanted to achieve in order to prepare myself for a run. And then in April, I found out that my husband and I were expecting our first child. So the last 35 weeks have been a period of transformational growth, literally. My platform for running and the very reasons that motivate me to run have shifted. I've interacted more with the healthcare system now than I ever have before. And policies that I've never heard of have had a direct impact on my life, in public, at work, and at home. All of these experiences have emboldened and empowered me as a leader and as a woman. So I've recently returned to the incubator and to my plan, and what I've discovered I think is worth underlining here with you tonight. The incubator teaches us that our plans don't have to be rigid or fixed. Our pathways are rarely linear. And life changes in an instant, and as women, we adapt and we move forward. So with the help of a curriculum that bends with me, and with a strong community of support through She Should Run, I not only know that I'll still get where I want to go, but that I'll be a better leader for it.
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Amanda. I'm currently a sophomore undergraduate student at Temple University. I'm studying both global studies and strategic communication with a minor in Spanish, and I am going to run for office.
Yes.
So I think my story starts when I was about 6 or 7, when I visited Abraham Lincoln's home and museum in Springfield, Illinois, and I convinced my parents by begging and probably pulling on their clothes, asking them to buy me a small pink shirt that said future president, and it had the American flag on it. And if you'd asked me around that time what I wanted to be when I grew up, I would have very confidently told you that I wanted to be the first woman president of the United States. But as I've grown up, flash forward about 10 or 12 years, I've realized that I can have dreams, and that's amazing, but that there's a difference between dreams and goals. And that's where She Should Run comes in, and helping me realize that I can have a plan and a step-by-step arrangement of how I can make my dreams an actual reality. So back in April, I received an email that said, "Have you ever considered running for office?" And I thought, yes, I have. I've thought about this pretty much my whole life. And one of my friends had found She Should Run, as well as my boyfriend, Alec, who I think is listening on live stream. So, hey. They both had, at around the same time, requested that I join the She Should Run community. And so I didn't really know that much about it, but I looked into it. I joined the online incubator, and I started looking through it, and it has so many great tools on there to help formulate your vision for your campaign, to know how to reach out to people, who to contact, how to have a strong mentor, and just all of these tools that I never really thought about. And so that empowered me, enlightened me, and inspired me to want to work for the Senate this summer. So I applied, and I ended up doing just that this summer. I interned for United States Senator Claire McCaskill. I'm from Missouri, so it was really awesome to work for a senator of my home state. And it was awesome and inspiring to talk to constituents on the phone daily, whether it was a positive or a negative conversation. I still learned from every phone conversation I had. But one of the most important things that I think I did and learned in that time was I actually got to work with our constituent services representative in the Springfield, Missouri office on casework for the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Department of Defense. And just having that one-on-one contact with constituents about problems that are so real to them and affect them through policy that people rarely know much about is just really important. And that's something that really stuck out to me this summer and something that inspires me to move forward. So I'm very thankful for She Should Run for empowering me, equipping me, and inspiring me to run for office. And I really look forward to the 250K by 2030 because I'm currently 19. You have to be 30 to run for a Senate seat. So that'll be around the time that I'm campaigning. So I'm really excited to see what the future holds, and I'm forever grateful and indebted to She Should Run for empowering me and inspiring me to be where I am today.
Yes. Well, that couldn't have segued better into our last panel of the evening. So let's talk the next generation of leaders, shall we? I'm going to host this one right now, because there's nothing I like better than some sassy future leaders. So let me show you who is coming up to meet with me. We're going to talk with Alison Carpenter. Can you come on down? She's the former Howard University student president. Yay, Alison. And then this is my other secret sauce in any event that I host or anything I can get her to come to. My friend Taylor Truden shows up when I ask her to. She's the marketing brand manager of reader engagement at the New York Times. Say hi to my friend Taylor. Hi, Allison. Oh, hey, Alec, watching on live stream. And then I'd like to introduce you to Jen Higgins, who is the board chair of Right Now Women PAC and a partner at Chamber Hill Strategies. Where is Jen? There. Hello. Fantastic. And then Safa Khan, please join us. She's a social media editor at Muslim Girl. Where are you, Safa? Hey, Safa. All right, fantastic. Hey, babes. All right, so Taylor, I want to start with you because prior to New York Times, you were at MTV.
Indeed.
And prior to that, you were at HuffPost.
Yes.
And you have spent your entire career thus far listening to young people and speaking to the issues that most affect them. And you and I often talk about the stereotype that we give young women in particular. So I just want to call it out right now. We often assume that women are either they're fanatical, we're dramatic, we're emotional, we're completely uninterested. We've been labeled in so many different narratives, right? What else do we assume about young women that we're totally wrong about?
We assume, well, not we, but many people assume that young women are apathetic and that they don't want to be involved in the political process whatsoever, when in fact that is absolutely untrue. We've seen this firsthand with young people who in the wake of the election are resisting, they're protesting, they're marching, they're having really meaningful, engaging conversations on online platforms that are producing really productive and powerful dialogue. And then we're even seeing teenagers running for local office, which is something that is so inspiring to me. When I was at MTV during the election, I had the amazing opportunity to interview Mary Pat Hector, who I use her as an example all the time, but I read about her, I think, in the New York Times, and then I realized that she had blown up everywhere on the national stage. She was the youngest person, I believe, to run for local office in Georgia. She ran for city council. And while she didn't ultimately win the seat, she was so inspiring to me, and I'm sure that she also inspired many, many other young people to run as well.
And part of that inspiration is, there's a saying that we talk a lot about in the representation game about we can't be it if you can't see it, right? So Jen, I want to talk a little bit about where we're not seeing young women Republicans in the media. We talked a little bit about it in the narrative, but I want to talk a little bit about the stories that are impacting, the issues that are impacting young women who are in the Republican Party. When you look forward to the future of this generation leading, what are those issues that they're caring most about, and how do you think they're going to bring those issues to light in their platforms?
Sure. Thanks for the question. I think what's interesting is I bring a little bit different perspective to this, working with an organization that focuses on recruiting young Republican women to run for office, under 40 Republican women to run for office, and I think you're right. We see sort of I wouldn't say lack of engagement, but we do see some disparities in terms of the number of women who are mobilizing and excited about running for office, particularly in this year and in this political environment. So to some extent, I think what we're hoping for and what I think we envision is continuing to sort of focus, at least from a Republican standpoint, on the values that are important to Republicans in terms of being small business owners, being focused on student debt, college affordability, areas around healthcare that may have been somewhat controversial, but I do think there are some opportunities to engage with that population. But from the standpoint of partisan politics, to be blunt, I think what's amazing about the opportunity like this and groups like She Should Run is that what we're learning very quickly is that a rising tide floats all boats, and the goal here is really to get as many young women and as many women as we can excited about running for office, giving them the tools they need to advance, because if we don't give them the tools, and to Jay Newton Small's point, that tipping point means that we get more women in office. It's not about getting more Republican women or more Democratic women, because at the end of the day, that diversity of thought and of concept allows us to advance a better and stronger generation.
Very well said. And so, Alison, we have a lot of firsts in this room tonight. You were the youngest elected official in D.C. history when you won the seat on the D.C. Advisory Neighborhood Commission at age 18.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. And then, not to be a slacker, you followed that up by taking on the student body presidency at Howard just a few years later. And so I wanted to know from you, as you were serving as the student president during the 2016 election, how did you see campus activism beginning to shape or influence the national conversation?
Thank you for that question. And actually in both of my roles, local official and student body president, I started off in 2014 when we saw Ferguson happening in Baltimore, and I think that the energy of students was high for the last 3-4 years. And I think what it showed me is that young people really are having a voice in our national conversations. We're in many ways through social media starting those conversations and making sure that the people who are elected to represent us focus on the things that matter to us. So in the 2016 election, I think we had some incidents on Howard University's campus that made the national news about different cabinet officials and different politicians trying to visit our campus, and our students just really being dedicated to making sure people understand what it is we stand for, what it is we're about, even being so young, not being afraid to stand up to a presidential candidate, not being afraid to stand up to a cabinet member, being willing to say what we believe in the face of anyone.
How do you feel as you start to look forward, how do you think activism on college campuses will start to impact the next generation of leaders and how they mobilize their platforms and their bases?
I think that we're getting creative in the ways that we try to impact policy. Before it was, obviously protesting has always been a part of student activism, but now we have students like me and other of my classmates who are now running for office, who are no longer just trying to sit down and talk to our elected officials, but who are saying, you know what, there are organizations like She Should Run, like Ignite, like Running Start, and there we go. Who are giving us the tools and the support that we need to make a difference today. And so I think that's the thing that's changing now. We're not waiting anymore. We're not. Our time is now.
Yeah, absolutely. Safa. Hi, Safa.
Hi.
You are brilliantly managing being a full-time student and influential student activist and a community organizer. And you're the primary community builder for Muslim Girl. And if you have not seen or checked out Muslim Girl, please do. Our friend Amani has made a beautiful and incredible community, and you're helping to build that as well. So I wanted to talk about the issues that are facing Muslim American women today,
Sure.
In particular. And what do you find you hear the most of your audience talking about in your community? What are the issues that they're most passionate about?
The biggest issue I think Muslim women today, especially in the media landscape that we're passionate about, is representation. And I think this speaks to a larger issue at hand too. Muslim women are essentially sick and tired of being talked about by people who aren't Muslim women, you know? And in today's political sphere, I think we're seeing a similar thing happen to women in general. Women, we're sick and tired of hearing people who aren't women talk about our issues. We're sick and tired of our bodies, of our lives, all being constructed and talked about and making policies on by men. And so Muslim women specifically, it's really interesting, but because the National Institute of Social Policy actually released a poll this past August in which they said that we are one of the most integrated members of societies in our different communities around the United States. And we, unlike what mainstream media would often say, in which we're isolated or we're not assimilating into the US fabric, it's essentially the complete opposite, because what we're doing is we're taking charge in our local communities. We're rising to the platform. We're getting involved in local social activism and really making sure that we're raising our voices. So the biggest issue surrounding Muslim women today is definitely lack of representation, really trying to stand up and make sure that we're taking advantage of all the platforms that we have available today.
And in your role, yes, and in your role in particular, like living in this online community and really sort of moderating and aggregating that community, how do you think the next generation of leaders will harness the power of social media? We talked about activism and finding creative ways to become part of the solution, but how will social media begin to impact the way that we view and look at and run for public office?
Definitely, and I think it's already really changing the entire media landscape in general. Social media has given everyone an equal platform, everyone an equal battleground. So you can go on and make a Twitter account or make a Facebook account, and you're essentially on the same playing field as everyone else. And it's allowed people to really get engaged with each other. So before, when you'd have to go to traditional media to go and get your news, nowadays you can engage with that news as a citizen journalist with social media. And already we're seeing the impact of that by seeing how tweets are being taken from online and being implemented and used in news mainstream today. And it's absolutely incredible, because I think in the future social media is going to be the number one, if not already, is going to be the number one way of communicating to the vast public and really being able to make sure that you're not only listening to your own views, you're just putting out your thoughts, but you're being able to grasp and understand what everyone else is saying. And so there's a lot of debate online and really engaging with each other. I think the biggest thing when it comes to social media is, sure, be vocal about what you believe in, but make sure that you're listening to the other side's perspective too and taking that into account, and make sure that you're having really constructive dialogue with one another.
Yeah. And I think, that was why in the beginning when I was talking about everybody really sits on their own social media platform, is their own media empire, right? Is that we have this opportunity now to pass the mic. We have an opportunity to showcase and highlight multiple points of view, powerful women, exciting women, interesting women who have a passion, a vision for running for office, for making community change. But we also hold that responsibility, right? We're not, I think all of us, as we communicate in this new age, and those that are digital natives, this is easier for you than it is for the oldies. But the idea that the toothpaste is out of the tube. This is how we communicate. This is how we tell stories. This is how we see things shifting and evolving. And one of the things we've been seeing shifting and evolving are old systems of leadership, old systems of patriarchy, old systems of societal, experiences that are crumbling. And so I'll put a different framework on the sexual harassment as I look at trends and follow what's happening for young women in the world. I look at this system of people coming forward as us really dismantling and breaking down the system of secrecy that we've had about this issue. And so when we look at, we said in the beginning, we're here because what's working, it's not working anymore. And we need to change that. So this is a question for all of the panelists. I'm curious, when you look to the next generation, so Jen, for the young women that you're recruiting to run for office, Alison, for the women that you are and the women that you know, and Taylor and Safa, what are the systems that we're going to be dismantling going forward in the future? What are the systems that we really need to break and shift and recreate?
Well, I hope that this generation is the one that makes feminism all-inclusive, and it makes sure that when we advocate for more women, we're including all women, trans women, disabled women of color. we're making so many strides, but it's important to make sure that everyone's coming along with us and that we're not leaving anyone behind. So we don't have to do this all over again in 20 years and in 30 years. And so I hope that dismantle patriarchy, dismantle all of that, but let's make sure that in our women's movement, in our fight for women, we're making sure we have everyone's back.
I would just add to that. I think one of the things that I noticed during my work on the Hill and engaging with candidates, particularly on the federal side of things, what you find too is that we have one committee in Congress, one committee that is chaired and has a ranking member that are women. That's the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee. Lisa Murkowski is the chair, and Maria Cantwell from Washington is the ranking member. There's no other committee where there are two women running policy on Capitol Hill. That's a problem. On the Republican side especially, we have women in Congress. We have Democratic women in Congress. We have 105, 106 women that are currently serving in Congress. 4 of those women are under 40. Or 4 of those are under 40. That's a problem too. But I think what we're seeing too is that if we want to break some of these cycles and some of these barriers, one of the things we do have to do is get these women in leadership roles, and not just in a role where they get to say they're in leadership, but really like have that model of saying you're driving the conversation, driving the policy. And right now we're not there yet on either side of the aisle. So my hope is that over time you're not going to just see a couple of female chairmen of powerful committees here and there. You're going to see a Kirsten Gillibrand as chair of Armed Services. You're going to see an Elise Stefanik as chair of Ways and Means someday. And that's really where I think it make a big difference in terms of taking strides forward without just having women in Congress, but having women in power roles beyond leadership, but driving the political and policy agenda for our country.
Yes.
And I also think that, building off of that, media is a really important landscape for women in general to be getting involved with, because, we have these really traditional routinal ways that the media tends to landscape and show women. There's more of a focus on what we're wearing as opposed to what our policies are. There's more of a focus on our external appearance and stuff as opposed to what we're really the driving force of what our thoughts are and what we're trying to implement, what we're trying to change. And the reason for that is there's not enough women, I think, in the media landscape. So while we're trying to get women to run for Congress and run for powerful positions for social policy and change, I think it's important to get more women in media as well, to really take advantage of the fact that they're there and tell our stories firsthand. There's an incredible documentary called Misrepresentation, which really highlights the issues of the lack of, the issues that arise because of the lack of women in media, the lack of representation we have in movies, the lack of representation we have in news and traditional media sources. So to drive change into social policy, I think it starts with the way we're represented in the mainstream media.
Those are all such amazing points. And again, to build off of that, as someone that works in media, and I know, Jess, we've talked about this before, and it's a stereotype that I'd like to break down, is that our culture is so obsessed with the idea that online life and real life are these two separate entities. And if you're a digital native like you, if you're a Gen Zer especially, it's not. It's the same thing. They're synonymous. It's a tool, and it's powerful, and it's where life is happening for so many people, young people, and that's where the future is, and that's where politicians, it's where media is going to have the most impact, is through those avenues. So I'd really like to change the narrative of that social media is this big, bad, scary thing that's turning your children into apathetic, obsessed monsters, when in fact it's actually really empowering, and it's opening up people's eyes. Teens, young people are literally learning about politics, about feminism, about everything under the sun through social media. So we need to start changing the way we talk about it.
And for Gen Z, coming up next year is a big election year for them. First time they're going to be able to vote. And so there's to renew and to inspire the power, not only to imagine yourself in leadership, but then to vote for the leadership you wish to see, is incredibly powerful. So we spent a lot of time talking tonight and talking to ourselves around women running for office and what we can do to help women and young girls run for office. I'd love to maybe start with Alison, go down the road to Safa, and I'm just wondering, as you look to the next future generation, what would you like to tell the next generation of boys?
Okay. I think that it's important that we stress for young boys. I heard Michelle Obama say this, so I feel like I'm jacking it, but...
There's probably not a better person to jack from, so go on.
I think teaching boys that in order to be a decent human being, it requires respect for women, it requires respect for people that they interact with, and that you can't be a good person if you if you are not respectful of women. And just also making them embrace women's issues. I don't know why we even call them women's issues, but making them feel like a duty and a responsibility for the issues that we talk about when we're in rooms like this, and making them see that as a part of their responsibility. Sexual assault, sexual harassment, reproductive rights, those are all issues in which they should be engaged in and also advocates for.
I would say be afraid, be very afraid. But more seriously, I would say know when and how to be an ally. And if you don't know, ask.
I would say that I've spent a lot of time in my career realizing that as a woman I needed to help other women, whether that's run for office or help them in their careers in advance, because it's an important opportunity, an important role as a woman. But I think I would tell young boys and young men that they can do the same thing too. They can look behind them and help pull up women, can mentor them and support them. It doesn't have to be women helping women. It can be men recognizing that they have a colleague, they have a friend, and they can say, you should run for office, or you should be VP. Maybe not me, you're more qualified. Let me help you get to that next place. And it may sound silly, but I do think that it's important for us to remember that our male colleagues are just as capable of helping women get to the next place as we are.
I think one of the biggest things I would tell the next generation of boys is, how about you listen to our stories, sit down and maybe listen to our perspective too, because, and of course, and also making sure that patriarchal system isn't an individual problem. It's dependent on the society that you grew up in and that you live in currently. And so understanding that as a young boy and realizing that you have the power to change a system that's already the issue. So it's not a personal issue that you need to take a stand on. It's a societal structural issue that you should be focusing in on to make sure that women's representation is better in all forms of leadership positions.
Because I think in the end, we're talking about the next generation, and to take a cue off of you, Alison, and your vision for that all-inclusive connection, we also have to include the next generation of boys and men and the current generation of boys and men to help us in this journey. So my last question is also a little future-leaning. We started the night with a vision. We spent some time in the middle getting very specific about our vision. We have a vision with She Should Run for 250,000 women to run for office by 2030. So I want to know, Safa, I'll start with you, and then I'll come back this way and end with Alison. What is your vision for the future? Now, I want you to imagine that happens. We have 250,000 women that have run for office, and many of them have successfully landed. This speaks to Jen's vision as well about these committee changes. So I'm just curious if we can end the night with you sharing, if you can, what does that mean for you? What does that vision look like for you? If you can lend some specific language and color to that would be really exciting.
Sure. So growing up, born and raised in the United States, I think, and I can speak to, I guess, a lot of, maybe specifically women of color too, it's really tough looking at powerful positions or leadership positions and not seeing someone like you up there. It's really it's not motivating, and it really discourages you from really taking part in that specific system or running for those leadership positions. So, the 250K by 2030, I see it as a multitude of different types of women, a multitude of different types of men, even who are feminists, who are proudly call themselves feminists, and really making sure that they're taking a stance on what it means to have 250,000 women running for office, and it just being beautiful and colorful in general.
I think mine would be that many of those women, those 250,000 women, are young. I think a part of this is when we talk about motivation and confidence and feeling empowered to run for office, what we find is that people who are further along in their careers, who have more resources, who have more of a stronger network, feel more confident in running. And what I want to see is, based on groups like She Should Run and Running Start that are building this pipeline, that what they're doing is setting a tone so that 250,000 women, or women in their 40s, women in their 30s, women in their 20s even, that are in Congress and making a difference. And I think, not that this is not meant to be age specific or discrimination, but I do really think that young women and young people have an important role to play in this society. And I think the more that we can generate that kind of exposure at a federal level, I think the better off our society will be overall, because I think, frankly, they're more open-minded. They honestly have a different and fresher perspective, but more importantly, I think they're more empathetic and more compassionate. And I think there's a big part of that we need, especially right now in this day and age.
Yeah, and thinking about my vision in that number 250K, I would love a good chunk to come from teen girls running for local office. And I recently read this really great profile. I'm unbiased. She's a YA author, Melissa Walker. She wrote a piece last week for Teen Vogue where she profiled 3 teenagers, 2 of which were young women who are running for either city council or their school board. And I want to see 20 of those a week. That's my goal.
I think my vision for that many women in politics, first of all, it's overwhelming just thinking about it.
It's exciting, right?
It is, absolutely. But that we do politics differently. That we don't just, I mean, obviously I want 250,000 women, but I want 250,000 good women. Women who aren't going to, just assume the status quo, who aren't going to do the same things that men have done. And we already know that women are different in the way they deal. Look at the government shutdown and the way that women were the ones who got our government up and running. But just seeing us do things differently, working together, talking to each other like people, and not like the way that our politicians engage with each other now. Just a different politics that isn't so hung up on division and bitterness, and just seeing what women can do when we're in control.
Yes. Excellent. Thank you guys very much for this conversation. So with that vision, we have come to the close of our program. But this is something actually, and Alison, you keep inspiring me endlessly, so I'm going to build off of what you just said, which is that the systemic change that we're seeking, we've talked about as both an evolution tonight, and quite frankly, it's a revolution too. It's both. It'll need both. It'll be messy. It'll be glorious. It'll be crazy. It'll be worth it. But they talk a lot, we talk a lot about the future is female. And actually, I'd love to just add as a closing a different thought maybe to ponder, which is that the future of leadership is feminine. And, oftentimes a feminine style of leadership means nurturing and collaborative and fierce and protective and inclusive. And these are all qualities that our communities are hungering for. But oftentimes we diminish the idea of a feminine leadership style as weak, and we dismiss it as ineffective. But when I think about rewriting the narrative around what leadership looks like, is that we give permission for women to embody feminine leadership, and we give men permission to vote for that feminine leadership. And so something to think about tonight as we close She Should Run's national conversation is, as we all hold this vision, not just of 250,000 women running by 2030, but by all of us stepping deeper into in our own ways of leading, that we can all step together, listen deeper, do the messy work, and continue to encourage each other to reach for our passions, to redefine the public narrative in any way that we can, and to pay it forward and to pass the mic to the next generation that is willing and ready to take up arms and to create a new political system and a new political structure. So it's not just that the evolution is coming. It's already here. We're doing it. We're evolving. And we're revolting. So it's an evolution and a revolution, and you've been an incredible part of that tonight. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for our panelists and for our speakers. And to close out tonight, I want to invite up Maggie Cavaleras, who is our chair of the board of directors for She Should Run. Welcome, Maggie.
Jess, you did just such an adequate job. Don't you think she's adequate? Super tops. Hey, and listen, I love all this call for the youth, but let's not rule out the old gals. I want to tell you something. The reason Debbie Stabenow, Dianne Feinstein, Claire McCaskill, among others, have to run is because they've got great positions on great committees. You do not want to throw those people out. That's my last paid announcement for tonight. Okay, so having given you the old people's speech, let's talk about who runs She Should Run. You run it. Our community runs it. But we know we all work for Aaron and for Claire and for Sophia. Round of applause for their fantastic program. Sophia, where's the rest of the team? And Jen? You're all working. So, Cindy? All right. Round of applause. Also, for the board of directors of She Should Run that work for these people, we've got some people here tonight. Natalie, stand up, please. Natalie Runyon. Linda Frankenbach, please stand up. Jess Weiner. Also, Wendy McKenzie, I hope you're out there listening in the Ethernet. Elsa Limbach, great board member. Melissa Lavinson on the West Coast. Reshma Sanjani, Girls Who Code. We got a great board. And Heidi Shenik. And who did I leave out? Cynthia Green Collin. Fantastic. So what really runs She Should Run? It's the pipeline that's going to get us these 250,000 candidates. We got to do this. It's a huge vision. You got to help us. We got to get there. Because as so many speakers said, we need to move the needle. It needs to be material. We got to have enough skin in the game to move the ball down the field. Help us. Thank you.
And now we invite you to the reception. Thank you all. Third floor.